This is Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing the themes and ideas expressed in the beloved story of Babette's Feast by Danish author Karen Blixen. Throughout the series, we'll talk with artists and special topical guests discussing things such as refuge and sanctuary, the art of hospitality, the importance of cultural exchange, beauty and pleasure, and the power of living in community. What makes our podcast unique is that you'll also get an insider's look at the many artistic and production decisions that are made in putting together a theatrical production as we rehearse a new play adaptation of Babette's Feast. So sit back and settle in for a stimulating dive into deep ideas and the world of theater magic. Well, I'm excited for another discussion on the Telling the Story podcast, and we're going to dig into the topics of refuge and sanctuary and where they're found in the story of Babette's Feast, also where they're found politically and literally and physically and throughout history, but also talking about them in terms of spirituality as well, the refuge and sanctuary when it comes to the spirit or when it comes to just life and living life. I'm joined today by two wonderful guests as usual. I'm joined by SARAH MCKAY, who is one of the performing artists in our current production of Babette's Feast. SARAH is an Ottawa-based actor and singer who has been working in the region since 2023. She's thrilled to be part of the fabulous team of Babette's Feast. Other Ninth Hour credits include development of the original work, Frankenstein AI 2025, playing the expert in the 2024 audio drama, Beauty Will Save the World, and being on stage in the ensemble cast of The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 2024. Offstage, SARAH has recently taken on assistant stage management in productions at the Ottawa Fringe Festival and Ottawa Little Theatre. She also dabbles in dance, playwriting, and theater creation. It's so great to have you back on the Telling the Story podcast, SARAH.
Thank you so much. It's a thrill to be here.
Great.
I'm excited for the discussion.
Yes, me too. I look forward to, I always enjoy talking to you, so it's great to have you for this discussion for sure. And then I'm also joined by George Dutch, no stranger to the Telling the Story podcast, right, George?
No stranger at all.
Yeah. So George is Associate Artistic Director of Ninth Hour Theatre Company. He studied acting at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver with internationally renowned theatre director Gundus Kallick during the 70s. He then joined Kallick's ensemble in Northern Australia for 5 years, where he taught a performance class in a university theatre program during the 80s. In 2024, George adapted Mary Shelley's novel into the original theatrical work Frankenstein AI, which Ninth Hour Theatre Company further developed. Throughout 2020 to 2024, he provided editorial and dramaturgical support for the company's original work, an audio drama, Beauty Will Save the World. George thinks theater should investigate big ideas related to the role of culture in shaping everyday practices of living. And that's why we're here, isn't it, George, to do just that?
Yeah, these conversations are always so stimulating.
Indeed. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. I thought we would start, as usual, with maybe some defining terms, like, what is sanctuary? What is refuge? Where do these terms come from, George? And how are they, what's the history behind these?
Well, the word sanctuary comes from the Latin root sanctum, which means sacred. So it is a place of refuge or safety, but it has the connotation of sacredness attached to it, like a church, for example, or some other holy place. Refuge, interestingly, comes from the verb fugere. I hope I'm not butchering the French language, which means to flee in French.
Really? So it's a French word originally?
Yeah. And so the idea that somebody is fleeing from something to a place of safety is the connotation that goes with refuge, which is a little different than sanctuary. I wouldn't use them interchangeably. I don't think they mean the same thing, but they're certainly related.
Interesting. Okay, so refuge has this connotation of fleeing something to safety, where sanctuary, that's not necessarily true. Okay, it's important to make that distinction because it's like, I remember I was asking you earlier, are these like terms that are synonymous or anything like that,
I think that we often use them synonymously or interchangeably because our culture has been has neutralized the sacredness of a lot of words that come out of a religious context of one kind or another. And they just become normalized in a secular sense, in a sort of everyday normal sense.
What are some examples, would you say, of how sanctuary? I mean, like today we often hear in the news, we have these sanctuary cities. Like, is that a new concept that's of modern day, or is that something that's been around a long time?
I think it's been around for a very long time.
Interesting.
We used it most recently in our production of Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yes, right.
In 2024.
Right.
And
That's right.
Sanctuary.
Oh, yeah.
The cry of sanctuary went up.
It was sung.
It
Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
it goes back a long ways to Old Testament times. Even, I think, before that in other cultures as well. There's always been justice is a relatively not a new concept, but it's been developed over time, right? And the old world was harsh and brutal, and people suffered a lot of injustice. And so a lot of societies recognized that you needed some kind of social mechanism to deal with injustice. And one of the ways they dealt with that is if somebody committed an offense and a lot of people felt that they were innocent, or that that they had a right to appeal or to justice, they encouraged them to seek sanctuary, often in a holy place of one kind or another, like a temple. And so that's I think where it comes from originally. There's always been a social need to have some kind of sanctuary available to people in a society that valued justice, at least to some degree.
And in your research, it seemed to go back a ways, and it seemed to be in different cultures, different aspects of it. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, so even, because we often think of justice, we think of our criminal justice system, which is quite modern compared to the, history of civilization. And we think of, prisons, we have prisons. And I was just thinking earlier about how even if you were to willingly go to a place of sanctuary, let's say it's before any criminal justice system of any sort, like even if you are willing to go to a place where you're safe, where you are going to be free from, I suppose, from being hunted down, or free from consequence or justice for your actions, whether you're innocent or guilty, but the fact that if you leave there, you're at risk again to being caught or disciplined. So in a sense, it is a prison. In a sense, like even though you've chosen to go for sanctuary, but you can't really leave. So it's like almost like this older version of prison in some way. What did you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that idea of sanctuary. Some countries have institutionalized sanctuary and made it legal for certain people under certain circumstances to go to a church, and that will protect them from the long arm of the law, so to speak. Canada doesn't have that law.
We don't?
No, we don't. I mean, people do go to holy places like churches or temples for sanctuary. For example, they don't want to be deported from Canada. They might go to a church and ask that congregation or that community of believers to protect them. And the state would be reluctant to go in and arrest that person for that particular offense. But I don't think they would have any compunction in going in there if a murderer was seeking sanctuary. Yeah.
So it's not a law; it's a custom. Then
it's
maybe?
A custom. Yeah. It's a custom or a tradition. There's even an organization in Canada called Sanctuary Canada. They have a website, and they give organizations like churches advice on how to deal with people that are making a claim or a request for sanctuary. But some countries, a few in Europe, for example, do have it on the books.
Really?
It is a place of protection from the law.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's interesting that, I actually went to a church once, and I remember someone explaining to me that like there was actually someone there that had been there for 20 years that was in there for sanctuary. I can't remember why or anything. I was young at the time, but I just remember finding it fascinating. Like, what? This person lives here? Like, I was kind of confused that someone would live in a church somewhere. But I can't remember what the reason was, but it was interesting that I came across that at one point. I think it was even here in Ottawa, I believe. But anyhow, it was really fascinating to learn that. And of course, when we did Hunchback of Notre Dame last year, we learned so much about sanctuary as well through some of your dramaturgy, George, and just the idea of people seeking the places where you have sanctuary. Of course, the Notre Dame was sanctuary for Quasimodo, I suppose, growing up there. And it was certainly sanctuary for Esmeralda when they wanted to kill her and the mob came after her. And Sarah, you were in Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I was.
And I remember you got to play one of the bad guys at one point, and you seemed to have a lot of fun. And what were your memories of the theme of sanctuary that came up in that production?
In that production in particular, it was such a strong theme, and it was an interesting thing to be part of the mob mentality, hunting down being one of the persecutors.
Right. I
suppose it's an unusual perspective to take for a person who would not normally be on that side of things. I like to hope. So it was an interesting challenge as an actor, and it was an interesting experience, I guess we shall say. But really juxtaposing the idea of the hunter and the hunted, I think, it really shows the power of those places of peace and calm and safety from what can be an increasingly scary world outside. And
can you remind me, was Esmeralda seeking sanctuary from the mob or from the elites or the law? Wasn't it the mob that was defending the practice of sanctuary? Was that it, or is it the other way around?
Yes. So the citizenry, the mob, as it were, did want Esmeralda to be freed and to be pardoned. She was one of their people.
Okay.
You're right. I did use the word mob, didn't I?
Yeah.
But more in terms of mentality. That sort of, and it was the larger system in place, the criminal justice system that had her arrested. And had her convicted
unjustly.
Yeah, exactly.
In the Hunchback of Notre Dame, we see the power of social institutions at work, because we had the church, we had the courts, we had the king, and they all exerted tremendous power over Esmeralda and over Quasimodo. And Esmeralda sought sanctuary in Notre Dame because she was treated unjustly by the archbishop in the church, as well as by the courts. And there was a real need to protect her. And the mob actually supported her because the nobility was treating her unfairly, unjustly.
Yeah, she was damned if you do, damned if you don't. If she confessed, she's a witch. If she doesn't confess, she's a witch. Like it was
no way out.
Yeah, it was an interesting scene because it was just obvious they wanted a scapegoat no matter what. And so, yeah, it was an that play was interesting. And especially when it came to sanctuary, refuge, scapegoats, mercy, all these themes. And of course, it was written in the 1800s, but set in 1400s, Paris, France. So obviously this idea of sanctuary was on Victor Hugo's mind, and obviously was some sort of practice that existed back then in France when it comes to the Catholic Church. So that's interesting. And then, of course, in Babette's Feast, another play with a character from Paris, France. Seeking Refuge. Yeah. We go straight into that. So it's like also set in the 1800s, right, Sarah? The Babette's Feast. And why don't you tell me a bit, Sarah, about who is Babette? Like, tell me everything you know about Babette, because it's called Babette's Feast. Who is this mysterious woman, Babette?
Well,
and why does it relate to our discussion today? You know,
well, Babette, the titular character of the play, is a French citizen, and coming from France in a time where they've had a lot of social upheaval, wars, revolutions, truthfully, sort of back to back, one on top of the other. The particular conflict that Babette is fleeing, if I remember our dramaturgy correctly, was the Paris Commune. She was a commune. 1871.
There's so many like different revolutions.
Well, there were so many revolutions, so many leaders. At this point in time, I believe what was happening, and George, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was that the communards were citizens of Paris. And they were a sort of a grassroots movement as they were coming off of an emperorship, trying to establish a more Republican style of governance. They thought they had control of the city with the military's support, but it turns out the military had their own ideas about how the country should be ruled. And as a result, it ended up being citizenry versus military in the city of Paris.
A civil war, basically.
Civil war.
And this was not their first
No.
revolution of any sort. They for those who are listening, if you think of French Revolution, you might think of Les Miserables and what went on in that story, but this is a different one, right, guys? It's not that one. It would be easy to assume it's the same one, but it isn't, right?
But there was that kind of turmoil and conflict basically for 100 years in France and all over Europe.
Wow. Wow. So what were the,
carry on. In Babette's context, she has been a revolutionary in her country. She's been supporting the troops in any way she can. Her husband and son have just been killed in the course of this conflict
by the military. Basically,
presumably, it's not disclosed in the play.
Okay,
by whom? Except they do name the general who gave the orders, I suppose.
Okay,
so I assume it was in the course of a military incursion of some kind.
Okay,
so Babette no longer feels safe to remain in France. And through friendships and connections,
she's got a price on her head.
Right?
She's hunted.
She is hunted. And she's been accused of being a pétroleuse.
Accused of being one.
Yes. So I believe
that's she one?
The reason. Well,
or is she just accused of being one? Yeah, I know.
Who can say?
I know.
Who was there?
She admits to being a communard.
She does.
She admits to loading rifles for the men folks.
She does.
Okay.
But she does not admit to setting anything on fire.
Okay. The text isn't clear to her admitting that. But it does speak to her being called that.
It does. Okay. Yeah. In the letter, the introductory letter from Monsieur Papin, who sends Babette to Berlevag to the safety of the sister's home, of the dean's home, mentions in particular that she's been accused of being a pétroleuse, that she fears for her safety and can no longer remain in France.
Right.
So is sent off into this quiet, isolated community in Norway, where this friend of hers, Monsieur Papin from Paris, had experienced their way of life earlier in his life, had fond memories of the kindness, the good people of Berlevag, and feels that it would be a good place for her to be safe.
Well, because she felt her life was in danger, right?
Exactly.
And it's a self-imposed exile. She leaves Paris for the sake of her own safety, to save her life. And she goes into exile in Norway, in Berlevag. She lands in Berlevag because she has a nephew who has a ship that runs cargo between France and Norway. So she takes the ship to the capital of Norway at that time, called Christiana or Christina, I can't remember, which later becomes Oslo. But at that time, the capital of Norway was called Christina. So she takes that ship that far, and the letter from one of her former customers at the Café Anglais, where she was the head chef, gives her a letter of introduction to the family in Berlevag, and she throws herself upon them and asks for mercy. This letter of introduction, and we're told, full of grief and sorrow.
She's lost her family.
Yeah.
She's lost her restaurant.
She's lost everything.
She's lost her career.
And now she's ended up in a strange country where she doesn't know the language or the people or the customs.
Way of life. Yeah.
Nothing and she's penniless. So she throws herself on their mercy. It's quite an introduction to Babette, isn't it?
It truly is. Arrives in a storm, exhausted, as you say, full of grief, full of suffering, and just at the mercy of her hosts.
Who live a very different way of life, very different lifestyle. Yeah, it strikes me as like quite the change, right? You go from top of your game, one of the most famous, excellent chefs in Paris, serving multiple course meals, each meal being 10,000 francs itself,
to princes and royalty,
and generals, and and you're schmoozing with the elites and all these things and making them making people happy with your food. And then, of course, conflict comes around, war. And of course, we can extrapolate this right to any country at any time, whether it be a war with guns, maybe it's a war on social media, maybe it's just a war of political factions not getting along. There is violence, maybe there isn't violence, but you can totally picture someone, being accused of something. And let's say she was a pétroleuse. Well, then, yeah, you could get in trouble. So maybe you need to flee because maybe you've done something wrong. Mm-hmm. But if you weren't, you're being falsely accused for political gain, and you have to flee because the system's going to be rigged against you, like we saw with Esmeralda and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And then, unfortunately, that kind of stuff goes on today in all sorts of countries in the world, in which there's people that are made an example of politically, whether they did the thing or not. It's almost irrelevant. They're a scapegoat for the big thing that went down, whatever that thing might be. And in this case, there's the one of the revolutions of France, which had many, like you said, George, 100 years of just sort of unrest and changing governments. And then, so she became quite literally a refugee. And you said the word is a French word, right, George? What was that word again? That French word that it stems from?
Fougere, that's right.
Fougere.
Fugere, I think is how it's spelled.
Fougere. Interesting. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Now, so that's in the play, and it's fictional, of course, but it's also relatable and realistic in many ways.
I think it's fictional, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the author, Isaac Dinesen, which is the pen name for Karen Blixen, as she was more commonly known. Mm-hmm. She also experienced a kind of self-imposed exile. Because, and I'll draw reference, we mentioned in a previous podcast that her personal story is dramatized through the movie Out of Africa, which was the Best Picture, Academy Award Best Picture in 1986. And it tells her story. And it's quite a tragic story, because by the end of the story, she moves from Denmark to a coffee plantation in Kenya that her family buys for her, so that her and her new husband will have something to do with their lives. And they come out of the nobility. They come out of the landed class in Denmark. She had quite a privileged upbringing, and she was used to wealth and comfort. Anyways, they chose to go to Kenya and take over the operation of this 6,000 acre coffee plantation. And the movie is all about the adventures that she has running this plantation, because basically her husband abandons her in favor of drink and carousing. And she ends up running the plantation during World War I. So there's all these hostilities that she has to navigate in Kenya during World War I. And she ends up, her husband abandons her, and she takes up with another man and has a love affair. Babette is, or not Babette, but Dinesen is played by Meryl Streep in the movie, and Robert Redford is her love interest. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the movie, her husband has abandoned her. Finch dies in a tragic plane crash, and her coffee plantation goes into insolvency. She basically goes bankrupt, and she gets very sick. So that was a lifetime venture, staying in Kenya, running a coffee plantation. And after 9 years, she's forced to go back to Denmark rather than stay in Africa. She takes like Babette, takes a journey across the world back to Denmark, which becomes a kind of self-imposed exile. She goes back to her family home, this estate in Denmark, and lives there from the age of 36 until 77 when she dies. She remains unmarried, and she's childless, and she's basically ill for that whole time, but she becomes a prolific writer, a prolific storyteller. Wow. And Babette's Feast is written by her about the age of 65, 67, and she dies at 77. During the time she's in Denmark. Yeah, so I think she very much identified with Babette. Yeah. And I just wanted to alert us and our listeners to that fact, that a lot of Babette probably contains much of the grief and sorrow and heaviness that Karen Blixen experienced in her own personal life.
Why do you call it self-imposed exile when she?
Well, she could have stayed in Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and her family had enough resources for her. She could have lived in New York, for example, or
any of the major cities.
Yeah.
A completely different lifestyle.
Right, exactly. But she chose to go back and find sanctuary
in her origins, on
her family estate, which she had fled. Basically, she was the one that left home. She spent a lot of time traveling around Europe, and then willingly went to Africa. So going back home to where she grew up, which is the place that she had fled for her own personal freedom, was a kind of self-imposed exile. Right.
And when she returned, was she returning to her faith? Did she ever have an interruption of faith? I know.
I don't know.
Yeah, because we had discussed that she was raised in sort of the similar, very orderly Lutheran tradition.
Piety with Lutheran piety.
Exactly.
In the state religion of Denmark at the time. Well, actually, it had been the state religion since 1536, since the Reformation. So she was deeply steeped in that religious culture, those traditions, especially by her mother and her mother's side of the family.
So her return home, in a large way, was sort of a reaffirmation.
It might have been
of that. Well, at least of steeping yourself back into that lifestyle, surrounding yourself.
It came with the territory,
culture, exactly.
That makes me think, because we often think being a refugee, like you said earlier, it's like fleeing something, it's running from something. And we often think in terms of geopolitical, or you're freeing a personal danger, like physical danger. But as you guys are speaking too, it just made me think as well that people certainly do flee and run away from their family of origin, or flee and run away from the town they grew up in, not because they're not even necessarily because they're physically endangered, or flee and run away from the religion or faith practice you grew up with.
The constraints, the restraints, the circumstances that they feel are hurting them rather than helping them grow as an individual.
Right.
Especially when you're young.
You have
that,
she was young.
You have that feeling of needing to escape whatever circumstances you're in and sort of forge your own path, right?
No, it's interesting. And as well, like in the Psalms, the Lord is my refuge. Like just what the idea of fleeing something, but then finding refuge somewhere or in someone or in something.
Very good point. I just want to be clear that the parallel to me is she fled or sought refuge back in Denmark. She was fleeing the grief and sorrow she felt in Africa because she lost a husband and lost a lover, her soulmate, however you want to describe it.
That she had built for herself.
A lifestyle that was very rewarding for her, running a big plantation. In those years, a woman running a huge plantation like that. So there was so much grief and sorrow in the same way that Babette fled Paris because she lost her husband, she lost her son, she lost her business. She carried the weight of grief and sorrow. So I think there's a kind of parallel there between the two women.
Definitely. And even in terms of the character Babette's accomplishments, the head chef of the Café Anglais, a position that you would imagine would be very difficult for a woman to achieve.
Point, Sarah.
They even say that right in the play, and a woman at that.
A woman, no less. Imagine. No, but it's true though, for a woman to work themselves up to that level of status that you're serving, princes and noblemen of Paris, and then to have that achievement and that sense of artistry and pride in what you've accomplished, and then to have that all taken away from you, to no longer be able to practice your art, to no longer be self-sufficient, in a way that means so much to all of us, and to have the grief of losing your family, your country, your way of life. I mean, it's hard to imagine how those things just stack up. Do you think if
her two family members had survived, would she well, I mean, we're being very hypothetical. Would she have fled with them? Would she have stayed in Paris because she has something to live for there? You know what I mean? Like, because you mentioned earlier about fleeing from your grief. You're not necessarily only fleeing from political persecution or fleeing from physical danger, fleeing from grief. A change of surroundings can go a long way to not be consumed by grief, I think, right?
Yes. I mean, grief is a very powerful emotion, and you can see why it would be a motivator for taking drastic action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's a very interesting character because obviously she had a choice on how to act politically, right? She could have just kept her head down and kept serving the nobility and the generals and the elite of Paris at that time. But for some reason, her family, her husband and son, they all decided to become communards. There was tremendous disparity in Paris at that time between the rich and everybody else, right? And the communards were committed to shrinking that disparity. They wanted more of their piece of the pie, or more of a piece of the pie, and she was willing to risk her life for that, and lost her husband and her son in the course of that. She made a choice and paid a heavy price. And I imagine that Karen Blixen must have felt somewhat the same thing. She chose to go to Africa. She chose to stay there. She chose the men that she had in her life. And it didn't turn out well.
Yeah, that's the tough part. It can turn out well, and it doesn't always, and you just don't know. You go, what's that expression? It's always greener on the other side of the fence. You just don't know, right? Sometimes this idea of trying to flee personal history or background, or trying to find refuge in something new where you're safe, where you're known, starting over. I mean, we all know people, of course, who had to start over in life because they had to leave one country and move to another. And of course, when we use the word refugee today, that's what we mostly think of, we mostly think of probably modern day refugees, in which there is a legal immigration and refugee system in place in some countries like Canada. Of course, what does it? I learned the other day, maybe this is not correct, but I heard it on a podcast that the legal refugee system became in place after World War II. That's how new it is. It's not like we had refugee status going back hundreds of years, right? It's more of a modern phenomenon that we recognize people are fleeing somewhere dangerous, and then we have an onus on us to take them in. Because
that's such a good point.
Is this,
my own family history, my parents, they met in Canada, but they were both living in the Netherlands under Nazi occupation during World War II. Well, the Netherlands was one of those countries that was destroyed physically and financially and in so many other ways, socially, during the war, that my parents' families felt that their best option was to leave the Netherlands and emigrate to Canada, to seek refuge in Canada, if you will, because their economic prospects in the Netherlands after the war were terrible. So they decided to come to Canada. And of course, the refugee system today accepts economic refugees as well as people that have been persecuted or suffered for their race or creed or beliefs or political associations.
Are they still called a refugee, though?
They weren't called a refugee at that time.
For economic reasons?
The government, today, made it easy for people to come to Canada at that time. But basically, they were fleeing terrible circumstances, right? Economic circumstances, basically. Their lives weren't in danger in the sense, well, I guess you could say their lives were in danger in the sense that the health system had been destroyed, the infrastructure, social infrastructure like health and education.
Sure.
Their ability to make ends meet, livelihood, all this sort of.
Exactly.
That's threatening.
Sarah. Right. Yeah.
Wow. So.
And my parents often talked about the kindness of strangers. You're basically, again, even though you have some government support, in those days there was a lot less of it. You're throwing yourself on the mercy of the kindness of strangers in the same way that Babette did. It was a remarkable thing that happened to her, landing at these spinsters, the home of these two spinsters, these elderly women. She was a complete stranger to them. One of the sisters, is it Philippa or Martine, knows a little bit of French.
Neither of us are quite sure of our French, to quote from the play. But I think we have enough knowledge to understand. It's Martine that reads the letter.
Yeah. Okay. So the sisters are able to welcome Babette to some degree, right? And they treat her very kindly and very well. She doesn't leave them.
No, she doesn't. And in fact, she offers everything she has to them. She wants to work for them. to earn her keep, I guess, so to speak. She doesn't strike me as the kind of person who would willingly accept charity. Babette is an independent person who works for what she has, and it makes the sisters quite uncomfortable, actually, who are not.
I see that. Yeah, I could see that in rehearsal. The act at the faces of you and the other and Kelty playing the sisters. You like really read that really well
because they come from a life of serving others. Their existence is service to their community and to God. And so to have someone come into their house and want to serve them, even as a thank you for a kindness, is incredibly uncomfortable for them.
And they almost don't even seem to question that they should take her in. It's almost like it's automatic part of the culture that you accept a stranger and show them kindness and hospitality.
Certainly.
Right. And of course, the play is dedicated to the kindness of strangers in foreign lands. And of course, there's lots of that goes on in the world that doesn't always make the news, does it? The good stuff that people are doing. There's lots of people with open hearts and good intentions. And then there's lots of examples, of course, in today and in modern history as well, where perhaps we had closed arms and we're not willing to take in refugees. From what I understand, even in Canada during World War II, we had to be pushed eventually to accept refugees from World War II. It wasn't an automatic thing we just did automatically. Correct me if I'm wrong, George, but I think we had to get there eventually that, maybe we should be acting, in places like Canada that had so much land and freedom while Europe was being consumed with war, So it's not automatic that people are just, bring in the strangers, bring in the refugees, that Statue of Liberty's there, give me your poor, give me your, I don't know the quote, unfortunately, but I do get the meaning of that. And, so of course people debate that today, don't they? Politically, just, how many people can you take in? Do you take in? Should you take in? Do you have the means? Do you have the system set up to be able to absorb the increase in people? Do you have to take everyone from everywhere? Can you be picky and choosy? These are very important questions that I think society should ask itself, and people should have nuanced conversation about, and not make it so black and white about that issue, right? And because it's complex, like everything, right?
It certainly is, and if you want to provide a safe place, you need to have that safe place ready. An issue that we've run into in recent years is that we want to bring people here to support them, but then people arrive and have nowhere to live, nowhere to work, services they can't in fact access from a strained healthcare system. If you're going to take care of others, you need to be doing that from a position of strength and capability.
That's such a good point. Such a good point.
There's a gap between the policy and the implementation of the policy, the execution of providing people with refuge.
Because we like the idea of it, don't we?
Yeah.
Of course, you want to provide people a place of refuge, but if it's not that, like you said, Sarah, with a house over your head and food to eat and a job, or even medical care, then what are you doing? And of course, many would argue, well, it's better than where they're coming from, I guess. But then again, though, it comes back to what you're saying, Sarah. Like, I think you have to operate out of a place of strength, out of a place of righteousness, like the sisters did. And in Babette's feast, it was part of their way. It was just part of their way of life.
But even that had to be managed.
Of course.
Right? Because Babette, even though she was one person, she was a bit of a disruptive force. She did shake the status quo that existed in this small, homogenous village, just with her attitude and with the values and priorities that she had in life. It's very interesting how the village responds to her, because at some point, the villagers are talking about how Babette has changed the sisters, and for the better, right? And that she had a positive influence on the sisters as well as on the wider community.
And that line is said many times about immigration. That's almost most people's pro-immigration argument is we need immigrants. They're the foundation of society. There's almost an implication that we'd be impoverished without them, which is maybe true.
And that we all started out as immigrants.
There is that, at least here in North America. That's But yeah, like you mentioned another podcast, George, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, Sarah. We were talking about community, and we were talking about, because George, you keep bringing up that Babette is a disruptor, not intentionally maybe, but a disrupting presence. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean she's intentionally disruptive?
I think just her presence.
Just her presence.
If I can hop in.
And I would say disruptor in a positive sense.
Okay. Yeah. Shaking things up, you mean? Kind of thing.
Well, any external force, I mean, in an isolated, segregated community, any newcomer is going to cause ripples, waves of change, right? Just the introduction of a new person, a new idea, a new way of life, a new way of operating will inevitably cause changes in the people around them and even to the place itself.
Yeah, and George was saying that, a community, you got the core, they got what they believe, what they value, and then you get the people on the fringes, on the margins,
or the edges.
Yeah, and that a community will die out if it doesn't change. In a sense, it has to change.
Certainly. And
so you need the Babettes in a sense, in that way. But I find that interesting in terms of immigration and refugee in a geopolitical way too, right? Sort of like becoming stagnant, not being, not reproducing, not evolving as a culture. There's something good, but it has to be done in measure, it seems, which is the counter argument, not a tidal wave of change, but an incremental one that a community can absorb and deal with. What do you think about that?
Well, I think growth is not possible without the injection of new ideas. You see this sort of thing online all the time, people in their echo chambers. It's impossible to change your view of the world, your way of life, without somebody bringing in a new perspective to whatever it is that you're dealing with or that you're speaking about. I don't think any sort of growth is possible without it. But we need differing perspectives. We need differing ideas and moral systems and to challenge our beliefs, to develop our beliefs, and find something that is cohesive.
And I think too, it depends on the context, right? It depends on the historical moment. There have been times when letting in waves of immigrants was very foundational to the development of a country.
True.
Think of America.
True.
And the settling of the West. They were letting in hundreds of thousands of immigrants from overseas, from Europe, essentially, so that there was this huge wave of immigrants going across the emptiness of the American prairies right to the coast, to California. And they needed massive numbers of people to settle the West and to catapult America into the kind of dominant country that they are today.
That's so true. Yeah, no, it's interesting because, it struck me, right, that just the other conversation we were having about how, the center doesn't automatically want to move to the fringes, to the margins.
Especially if it's homogenous.
Yeah, but the margins do shape the center. And also,
they influence it.
They influence,
And I would argue usually in a positive way.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's interesting.
And we definitely see that in the play as well. Babette's reaching influence into the community and into the House of the Sisters, and how her approach to life, her approach to grief, to her art, to her spirituality really does change the way the sisters feel about how art and faith can.
But not right away.
No. It takes years. It takes 12, 15, 20 years of living together, and slowly that incremental change, as you say, living with someone day in, day out, learning them, loving them, appreciating them for who they are, and sort of gaining a deeper understanding as to why they are the way they are, and how that. Well, I'm losing my words, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And it's often accompanied by an inciting incident of some kind that comes from the outside. So in the play, she wins a lottery, right? 10,000 francs. That changes everything.
It's true. An unbelievable thing.
And she could have used that to start a new life.
Yeah, she could have gone back to France with that money or whatever.
Yeah.
Opened her restaurant again.
Exactly.
Picked her life up where she left it off.
Or gone to Christina and opened a new restaurant, right? But she doesn't. She stays in the village. I just find that inciting incident, that plot twist, so interesting because it's such luck. It's just blind luck, right? And there's that wonderful line in the play that the dean speaks. That how does it go? That
God's path.
Across.
The God's path was running even across the salt sea and the snow-clad mountains where man's eye sees no track.
Sees no track. That's right. So that idea of fate or luck or an unknown future can change everything. And it certainly changed that village.
Like we can't see the track doesn't mean it's not there. You mean like there's change is possible. Extraordinary things could happen. You never know. Don't give up. Right? Who knows what could happen?
Right. It puts a value on hope, right? You can always hope for the unexpected to happen. In fact, if I got this correct, Babette even alludes to the fact that she might win the lottery. She even says that to the sisters at some point, doesn't she?
She does. When we ask her if she has any family left in France, she says that she has a friend, a good friend who each year enters her name in the French lottery, and that someday she might win those 10,000 francs. She has that hope.
And she does. She wins it.
And she does. She wins it. It's a beautiful thing.
I love that.
And would you say then she's found sanctuary with this community?
Well,
she started out as a refugee, but she chooses to stay, right?
Well, she definitely becomes a member of the family to the sisters. Certainly. And sort of in a strange sense where we sort of think of her as our younger sister. We've taken her in, we're raising her up. And I think she sort of looks at us in the same way, like her younger sisters, because she's so worldly and she has so much knowledge and so much life experience, and she humors us.
I love that line at the end of the play where she says to Martine and Philippa that these nobles that she served at the restaurant were trained to appreciate her art in a way that you could never imagine, that the sisters could never imagine. That's such a great line.
It really is.
There's a lot of great lines.
Yeah. To directly answer your question, I would say, yes, she did find sanctuary because there is an element of sanctum, of sacredness in that home. First of all, they're very pious, religious people. And then she performs what I would consider to be a very religious act by organizing her feast, Babette's feast, which is a religious act almost of communion, where she introduces grace to this community in a way that they've never experienced it before.
Oh, that level of generosity. Imagine 10,000 francs on one meal for your community
for 12
to share
people
together. I mean, wow.
And she created more than just food. Like she created opportunity. She created an experience. She created transformation. The food is just the paint to tell about the light, as C.S. Lewis would put it, right? The light is what she created there rather than, and she used food to do it. She used food to bring these people together and to,
have a transcendent experience of love.
That's right.
That was unearned, right? It was a gift. That's what grace is. It's a gift.
That's her great art, isn't it? Great artistry.
Unearned gift,
yeah. Well, because it's easy to gloss it over and be like, her artistry is she's a good cook. But it's easy to just stop there. But that's not what occurs in the play. It's not what occurs in the story. It's more than a meal. Yeah. They don't even know what they're eating. They've never had this before. They don't know that it's good.
Yeah. And they're determined not to like it.
Yeah. So it's kind of
even in Paris, when she was at the Café Anglais, which character says that she created, it was like, when you went to dinner there, it was like a love affair. And she creates a different kind of love affair in her feast in this village of Berlevag. It's a love affair where old insults and injuries are reconciled. People open up their hearts. They have great memories of times that they shared together. They open up their hearts to grace, to love, to this gift that she's giving them.
And are able to accept it without guilt.
I think that's such an important point too. Yeah.
Let's talk about spirituality for a moment. Where do you think, Sarah, without judgment, of course, where do you think, in general, people in our society, in our culture particularly, that we live in, that we're immersed in, where do you think people generally find refuge, and sanctuary. You are listening to Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. We'll return in a moment with the rest of our discussion.
Ninth Hour Theatre Company presents Beauty Will Save the World, a brand new musical audio drama for the whole family. Embark on a seafaring adventure and thought-provoking cautionary tale about the importance of passing on beauty to the younger generation, where relationships once lost are found again, when tested to choose what they stand for and who they will stand with.
Beauty will save the world! I felt it! I've lived it!
Laughter, action, and tears, reminding us about the sacred things that make life worth living. To listen to full episodes or exclusive behind-the-scenes content, go to beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
I want to more than just survive. I want to hope and feel alive. I want to live, truly live.
beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
And now, back to the discussion. Where do you think people generally find refuge and sanctuary? Do you think it is faith? Like I mean, most people. I'm asking, like, for your opinion. Where do most people? Where are the different ways that you see people trying to find sanctuary or refuge in our society, even if they don't know that they're doing that? I think that's the important question too. You know, is it religion? Is it faith? Is it government? Is it politics? Is it culture? Is it this? I don't know. What are your opinions on that and your observations on that?
Well, I think, in our modern context, in the part of the world where we live, where we're privileged that personal safety is and violence is not a daily concern for us, refuge and sanctuary sort of takes on a different meaning, more of a mental, spiritual, religious experience. And I think a lot of people, as we were discussing before we started recording, I think a lot of people find refuge in their homes, in the places that they make sacred for themselves.
I know I do.
Places that are, their literal home, or in some places their home away from home. But yes, a place that they have made sacred to them, whether that is their physical home or, maybe for an actor like me, it's a theater that I spend a lot of time in that has become a safe place for me. And as well as I think with loved ones, people have that feeling of sanctuary, of refuge. More abstractly, I think time in nature, time outside, time to yourself for quiet meditation, reflection, time for stillness.
That's observable, huh? Our love of spending time in nature recreationally or otherwise.
I think so. I think it's good for the spirit, especially for, we live in such a fast-paced world in which we're sort of plugged in all the time, the onslaught of information and things to do and places to be. And I personally find it very overwhelming on almost a daily basis, and I think a lot of people do. Yeah. And I think even just taking time to unplug, I think even just taking time to not look at your phones or your screens and just be present in your daily reality can be a refuge for people, away from thinking of the larger cares of the world, of society, and just having moments to quietly reflect and have time in prayer, have time in meditation, have time to center and ground and to just exist in the present reality. I think there's a lot of pressure to live sort of simultaneously in the past and in the present and in the future all at once, and to be able to take moments of stillness, I think, and quiet is a real refuge for a lot of people. But in terms of a physical place, I think home and other places that we sort of sanctify as those sacred spaces.
Like you said, a rehearsal, maybe a rehearsal or something.
And again, more abstractly, and I guess, again, maybe this is because I'm an actor, but I observe a lot of people taking refuge in stories. I observe people taking a lot of refuge in various forms of escapism.
We love our movies, our TV shows, our books.
And there's something about getting lost in a story that really is a safe place for a lot of people. I don't know if you are like me, but I love to watch and rewatch. There are certain stories that I just, that have lived with me since I was young, and I love to return to them. I love returning to characters and places and observing little details. What are people doing in the background? What am I not supposed to be looking at? Just soaking everything in and taking some time to, let your mind exist in a different reality, even as a different person to absorb their mindset, their perspective on things.
I think that's so true. I was telling Charlie that in terms of finding sanctuary in a story, that when I was digging into Babette's Feast and the dramaturgy of it, the meaning of it, the symbols, the motifs, the themes, sometimes I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. and I would be thinking about the play and some of the themes and the meanings of those themes. And I would lie there for 2 hours with a smile on my face, thinking about them, at peace with just enjoying the story and what it was giving me.
Yes.
Not many stories do that for me, but this certainly did.
Wow.
And I certainly found, and there is to me sanctum in that. There is something sacred about that I could wake up in the middle of the night and it didn't bother me a bit to lie awake for 2 hours and just enjoy this story and the way I was thinking about the plot and the themes and the characters and stuff. Physically, I'm not sure about finding, or at least for me, sanctuary in the home. You live with other people, there's duties, there's obligations.
Oh, that's certainly true.
There's friction, there's tension sometimes. I mean, there's lots of good things too, but it's not a place that I necessarily would feel at peace the way I would if I went for a walk in the woods by myself and found a nice little corner next to some water and I could sit there for a couple hours in peace and just enjoying the beauty of creation. I think for some people, they do find that in their family, sanctuary in their family. I can certainly understand it, Charlie, we're living in your apartment, that's a place of sanctuary for you.
And the reasons why is no one's saying anything rude to you. No one's making fun of you. You're just free of all that. You're not exposed to the world. And I think a lot of people can relate. And if it's not their home, I think we live in a culture that seeks refuge.
Or it could be your room. Some people, I've heard of people saying they go to their room to get that peace.
Yeah, but I think also we live in a generation where people seek refuge on the internet. So they seek refuge from reality, from real life, and from having real friends and real community. And they seek refuge and sanctuary on the internet where there's a degree of safety in the sense that you are in your room,
really?
You're in your room, so you are physically safe and you're socializing anonymously. And you sound surprised by that, George.
I am.
I think that's been going on for a few decades now that people find refuge from real life and go online to find a different life for themselves, one that they don't get to live out in real life, And
it is a community like any other. People do seek refuge in communities, whether that is a church, a religious community, whether it's the theater community, which has so quickly become a place of refuge for me to be among other artists and people who want to play and create. That's such a refuge for me. And it's a community like anything else. I think people seek out these other like-minded individuals to really feel a sense of safety and security where they can express themselves freely and not be worried about policing their thoughts or their language and just being open and free with their
instead
ideas.
Of being misunderstood. That grades on your soul throughout the day if you're misunderstood often.
Certainly.
And you get home, you're like, no one to misunderstand me. So like there's sanctuary and being around people that understand you.
Certainly.
Or being in solitude, because that also is a place where no one's misunderstanding you other than yourself, perhaps. And in music, right? People, I think, definitely take refuge in music, just being lost in a song and the lyrics and letting it speak to their soul and speak to their, I think that's also true as well, right?
So people are fleeing some kind of existential angst?
Maybe, fleeing a reality maybe, or fleeing the real conditions of their life. I mean, that's why we like stories, I think, as well, often is fleeing reality and immersing ourselves in something that's not true, not real, because it allows us to maybe sometimes forget, right, about some of the troubles that we have or the challenges we have or the limitations that we have.
The sense I got when I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about this story is that it was helping me to see reality for what it really is. Because we're surrounded by voices during the day telling us all the time a version of reality that suits a particular power structure or influence or whatever.
Yes.
But what I found solace in, what I found sanctuary in, is I came to a kind of clarity or peace about what reality really was, at least what I think it is. And that's peaceful. I'm not sure I find that when I go to a church service, because the church service is led by a leader, by a pastor, and you're following a liturgy, a tradition. You follow certain obligations in that tradition. Whereas I often will go into a church by myself, especially churches where the doors are open, and I could sit quietly there and just enjoy selfishly, enjoy a sense that, being in that church, being steeped in the story that this church upholds and protects and promotes, just feeling a sense of gladness in my heart and feeling that it takes away some of my sadness and it eases my troubles. That there's a kind of peace that goes with
something
that.
greater than yourself, right? Yeah.
Connecting that or tapping into that and just, again, feeling that gladness in my heart and feeling my sadness dissipate, being removed, emptied of that sadness and just enjoying being at peace with that.
Well,
these are wonderful moments.
I too find sanctuary in stories. I mean, I wouldn't be in theater if I didn't. I'm hugely moved by stories in my soul, like massively. It's the way it's the communication language for me is stories. I mean, it's just stories are like good stories. We're talking about deep, meaningful stories that brush up against your assumptions of life in a way that is good, and you grow from it, and you just go, because it's just such a good point that you've always observed to be true, but never articulated for yourself. And yet this story is showing you this beauty, this truth that you've always known or something.
It's amazing how often works of fiction will hold a mirror up to the world and allow you to put words to thoughts that you've had or observations that you've made, and just sort of allow your mind to unpack and understand these things in a new way with a new vigor. It really is something special.
That's so well put.
And I also find refuge when I go for exercise by myself. Like when I go for a run, I've been running my entire life, long distance running.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. And
that is not an easy thing.
Yeah. And it's a time in which I get some of my best thinking done. So there's an aspect of, even though I'm moving and I'm out in public, but there's an aspect of inner sanctum going on here. Like, that term inner sanctum, you're sort of like, I feel like it's a time of deep contemplation, even despite my body moving quite fast, So that's like, what about you, Sarah? Like, where do you find personal sanctuary for yourself on a sort of regular basis, or a place of refuge?
Oh goodness! I mean, I've talked a lot about the different places that I find refuge already, I think, but in theater and stories in my home, I was unrooted for many years, moving once or twice a calendar year, trying to I did that for a decade. When I moved to the city, just kind of bouncing from place to place and never really landing anywhere.
That's hard.
So I've been where I am now for 6 years, almost 7 years. And it feels so nice to put down roots someplace and unpack my suitcase, so to speak, and hang a picture on the wall. And well, it's true though, to feel like you have some place that really is a safe place for you to come home to.
A home. Not a temporary place.
Not
where
a
you live out of
temporary
your
place,
boxes.
and I did that for so many years that I think it's had a whole new meaning for me. To be able to establish a place that's mine, that has that security, that that will always be there, that a place to return to that's filled with love and with meaning. I think that's
love, huh? It's so key, yeah.
It truly is. And I think for me, sanctuary is in all of those places where I feel love from the people around me, from my friendships, from my family. You know, there's nothing quite like the feeling of being loved and supported and loving and supporting others, you know, where you can really sort of feel that sense of oneness.
Yeah.
Oh, in nature, I've got to say the river.
Water.
There's
Water.
something so, and
Yes.
like I grew up next to a river, so maybe I'm biased, but I feel like this is something that lives in every human being.
It's pretty universal.
There's something about being near water that is, it feeds you in such a way. It allows for a different type of reflection, but there's such a calmness and a peace and almost a feeling of insignificance, but not in a diminishing way, in an empowering way. It's hard to describe.
I wonder if it's because it's stable, like it's powerful, like it can destroy things. Like water is powerful force, but then so it's consistent and yet not, like it's moving. Like you're there next to the water. It's moving, things are happening, but yet it's consistent as well. There's a groundedness and a rootedness to it. And you can come back 3 months later and it's still there and there's something unchanging about it. And yet it is changing as you watch it. So
yeah, but it's almost, I think that you're searching for like a mystical.
There's a mystical
connection.
Quality to it.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's offensive to a rational mind, right?
It truly is. So what does that come from? But that feeling is real.
What's wrong with embracing the mystery or embracing the mystical occasionally? You know, like and again, we see some of this in Babette's feast at the end. You know, when they exit the feast, the home of the sisters, and they go out into the snow, and the snow is falling, and there's this almost mystical experience that they have of oneness with each other and being loved and appreciated just for who they are. And the snow is falling and it keeps
so
falling.
Transcendent.
It's such a beautiful moment.
It is.
Yeah, and we talked about the differences between refuge and sanctuary. And I know even in our own conversation, we started to interchange them and stuff, but it was like, it's interesting. You can flee from reality and immerse yourself in stories. You're like a refuge from reality. You know, you talked about escapism, right, Sarah?
Or an access to a higher reality or a deeper reality.
Right. But what I'm saying is that like stories is a good example, or music. Again, you can be fleeing from something and escaping into it to ignore and avoid what you're fleeing from, or other way around, going into music or stories to actually grow and to act like you're not necessarily fleeing, you're nurturing yourself. And it's a different, again, that slight difference between like refuge, like running away from something versus
embracing
something and entering into something that benefits you, I think. And because I think you can be a refugee and not find sanctuary. Like
certainly.
You can certainly correct. I mean, right?
Of
like
course, you can get stuck in that grief and sorrow or anger, or a lot of negative emotion. And that's what's so great about this story, and hopefully the story of many people that have gone through that experience, that that grief and sorrow, anger, whatever, is transformed into something much more positive. And, you know, it leads to some experience of love that's healing, and that helps nurture growth and understanding and more love.
And Martin and Philippa's community might stand a chance now.
Oh, I think so.
Of surviving, of growing, of generating new things, new ideas, new life, new culture.
Some of them got to get married and start having kids, though.
That's certainly true.
That's true. Yeah.
But it's true. Babette allows them to see generosity of spirit, grace, in a whole new way that they had not yet experienced. And it is transformative for them to see there's more than one way to be that good person that we all want to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. Last words for our listeners. Any last thoughts that you might have, George, that you want to leave people with in terms of this topic?
Yeah, I would like to encourage them to come to the play and get an experience of beauty, truth, and goodness that they might not otherwise have had in life yet.
Well said. Thank you. Succinct and to the point. An excellent point. Definitely come see the play. Like, nice pitch. And what about you? What about you, Sarah? Anything you want to leave listeners with on this topic about sanctuary and refuge?
I echo George's sentiments about coming to experience the play itself. But I guess I would also encourage people to take the time to slow down and to find those places and those people and those moments that bring them sanctuary. You know, it's a very busy and intense world that we live in, but quiet reflection, self-reflection, growth, development, these are things that you can't put a price on, you know? So take that time for yourself, find those things that bring you peace and allow them to change you for the better.
Indeed. I was joined today by SARAH MCKAY, performing artist in Babette's Feast, playing at the Gladstone Theatre in November 2025, and also joined by George Dutch, Associate Artistic Director for Ninth Hour Theatre Company. This has been Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing the themes and ideas expressed in the story of Babette's Feast. You can listen again to this and all our podcasts through YouTube, Spotify, and directly on our website, ninthhour.ca. Be sure to follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter to be the first to receive exciting announcements, opportunities, and behind-the-scenes content. We hope you'll join us again on Telling the Story.